Welcome back to the channel. Numismatic Coins. The 1946 Wheat Penny stands as a small but meaningful piece of American history, minted just after World War as the nation returned to peacetime life. Restoring the classic bronze alloy and continuing Victor D. Brenner's iconic Lincoln and Wheatear design, this coin reflects a period of renewal, growth, and everyday American resilience. Whether collected for its heritage or admired for its symbolism, the 1946 Wheat Penny remains a timeless reminder of the era that shaped it. Top 5 First up. The 1946 Wheat Penny belongs to the long-running Lincoln Wheat Cent series, one of the most iconic and widely collected U.S. coin types. Designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner, the Wheat Penny had first appeared in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Its obverse featured a portrait of Lincoln unlike any previous U.S. coin, since he was the first real historical figure, rather than an allegorical symbol, to appear on circulating American currency. On the reverse, Brenner used two stylized wheat stalks to frame the denomination 1 cent. The wheat motif symbolized prosperity, agriculture, and the hardworking American spirit. Though simple, the design became instantly recognizable and remained in use until 1958. The 1946 penny continued this tradition in the immediate aftermath of World War, representing a moment when the United States was transitioning from wartime to peacetime production. The historical background of the 1946 wheat penny is especially tied to the massive wartime demands placed on U.S. mints from 1942 to 1945. During the war, copper was a critically needed resource for ammunition and equipment, leading the U.S. Mint to ration materials. In 1943, cents were famously struck in zinc-coated steel rather than copper, resulting in the well-known steel penny. By 1944 and 1945, however, the mint restored copper coinage using spent cartridge shell brass from military training facilities. These shell case cents have a slightly different metal composition than pre-war issues. When 1946 arrived, the war had ended, the supply of cartridge brass had diminished, and the mint shifted back to its typical pre-war bronze alloy. Thus, the 1946 wheat penny marks the first year after WWII when U.S. cents returned to an earlier, more familiar composition, 95% copper, with the remainder a mix of tin and zinc. In terms of production, 1946 was a year of very high mintage as the American economy revived and the nation experienced early post-war growth. Cents were struck at 3 facilities: Philadelphia No Mint Mark, Denver D, and San Francisco S. Philadelphia alone struck hundreds of millions of coins, making the 1946 issue one of the more common wheat pennies of the era. Because so many were produced and widely circulated, most surviving 1946 cents exhibit noticeable wear, although well-preserved uncirculated examples exist and are popular with collectors. While the coin does not contain rare varieties on the level of major double dies from other years, small die cracks, mint marks, and minor die deterioration varieties are known within the series and can be of interest to specialists. The 1946 wheat penny also represents a cultural and economic moment in American life. As soldiers returned home, industries retooled, and consumer demand surged, these modest copper coins passed through the hands of millions of Americans rebuilding their lives. Children collected them, soldiers saved them as pocket change from the first days back in civilian life, and families used them daily in the growing post-war economy. Although common today, the coin is a small artifact of optimism, stability, and everyday American experience in the late 1940s. Its design, which would only last a dozen more years before being replaced by the Lincoln Memorial Cent in 1959, stands as a nostalgic symbol of U.S. coinage. Next up, the 1955 D. Lincoln Wheat Cent, struck at the Denver Mint, belongs to the long-running Lincoln Cent series that began in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin features Lincoln's right-facing portrait on the obverse and 2 stylized wheat stalks on the reverse, a design used from 1909 through 1958. By the 1950s, the wheat cent had already become an American icon, both a workhorse of daily commerce and a favorite among collectors. The year 1955 is one of the most talked about in Lincoln cent history, primarily because of the famous 1955 double-die cent from the Philadelphia Mint, but the Denver minted coins also carry their own significance as part of this transitional decade in U.S. coin production. The Denver Mint produced the majority of Lincoln cents in the century, and 1955 was no exception. With 563,257,500 cents struck, the 1955 D penny represented one of the highest mintages of the decade. This large production run reflected post-war economic expansion, increased national cash circulation, and the government's reliance on low-value coins to support millions of daily retail transactions. Despite the massive output, the Denver Mint of the time was known for fairly consistent quality. Most 1955 D cents were crisply struck, though high-speed presses occasionally led to softer details on Lincoln's hair and beard. Because the famous double die happened only in Philadelphia, the 1955 D enjoys a more stable identity as a typical, yet important, member of the wheat cent family. Compositionally, the 1955 D was part of the classic Bronze era of the Lincoln cent. Each coin is made from 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a mix used for almost all cents from 1909 through mid-1982. This composition gives older wheat pennies their familiar reddish-brown color and long-lasting durability, allowing many 1955 D examples to survive today in attractive condition. While not scarce in lower grades, the coin becomes far more desirable in uncirculated red condition, since copper oxidizes easily and few coins from the 1950s retain their original blazing mint luster. High-end examples, especially those graded or by major grading companies, command strong demand among collectors due to their beauty and relative scarcity. Historically, the 1955 D penny represents a midpoint in the wheat cent series, which would end only a few years later with the 1958 issue. The mid-1950s were characterized by mechanical improvements at U.S. mints, economic stability, and widespread public familiarity with Lincoln's portrait. Though everyday Americans rarely noticed the mint mark on their change, collectors have long traced how the Denver Mint's enormous output shaped coin availability and long-term survivability. For the 1955 D in particular, its role is often overshadowed by the Philadelphia double die, yet the Denver coin forms an essential backdrop that helps collectors understand the broader production landscape of the decade. Today, the 1955 D wheat cent serves as a popular and accessible entry point for new collectors while still offering depth for advanced numismatists. Its history ties together the legacy of the wheat cent design, the economic boom of the 1950s, and the precision of mid-century minting technology. Whether found in old penny jars, inherited collections, or professional dealer inventories, it remains a tangible piece of American history, one that connects modern observers to a period of growth, stability, and the enduring symbolism of Abraham Lincoln on the nation's smallest coin. Next up, the 1950 D wheat penny, struck at the Denver Mint, is part of the final decade of the Lincoln wheat cent series, one of the most iconic and longest-running designs in United States coinage. The wheat cent, officially known as the Lincoln cent, began in 1909 to commemorate the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. It was the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real historical person rather than an abstract representation of liberty. By 1950, the wheat cent had already been in production for over 40 years, becoming a familiar and deeply trusted coin for Americans living through the Great Depression, World War II, and the post-war boom. The 1950 D penny represents the continuation of that legacy into the modern era, produced at a time when the U.S. economy was rapidly expanding and domestic coinage demand was rising. The Denver Mint, which opened in 1906, played a major role in supplying the nation with circulating coinage for the growing population of the western and midwestern states. By 1950, Denver was known for its high-quality, high-volume coin output. The 1950 D issue had a mintage of 334,950,000, a substantial production run that reflected the economic optimism of the early 1950s. Although high in quantity, these pennies carried the same detailed craftsmanship that defined the wheat cent: Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and the symbolic ears of Durham wheat on the reverse, representing American agriculture, prosperity, and national resilience. The D mint mark placed just below the date identifies this coin as a product of Denver, setting it apart from Philadelphia and San Francisco issues of the same year. Historically, the 1950 D wheat penny falls in a period of stability and transition. After wartime steel cents were issued in 1943 to conserve copper, the U.S. Mint returned to a predominantly bronze composition, 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Mint continued using this alloy, producing coins with a rich reddish-brown luster when freshly struck. Many 1950 D cents survived in uncirculated condition because people frequently saved new pennies from bankrolls as inexpensive collectibles. The 1950s were also a golden era for penny collecting among children and hobbyists, as coin boards and albums became popular nationwide. As a result, the 1950 D is widely available today in circulated grades, but well-preserved examples with full original luster remain of interest to collectors. The wheat cent series itself would last only a few more years beyond 1950. In 1959, the U.S. Mint replaced the wheatier reverse with the Lincoln Memorial design to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. This change marked the end of an era, making all wheat pennies, including the 1950D, a nostalgic symbol of early to mid-20th century America. In this wider historical context, the 1950D issue captures the post-war optimism, the increasing minting capacity of the Denver facility, and the enduring love Americans had for small but meaningful works of art in their everyday money. Collectors today view the 1950D wheat penny as a classic mid-century Lincoln cent, valued not for rarity but for its connection to the long heritage of U.S. copper coinage. Its story reflects the evolution of American industry, culture, and numismatic tradition. Whether found in an old jar of change inherited from a family collection or purchased for its historical significance, the 1950D remains a tangible piece of the United States past, linking modern collectors to the decades when the wheat ears still symbolized the backbone of the American economy. Next up, the 1953D wheat penny is part of the long-running Lincoln Wheat Cent series, officially known as the Lincoln Wheat Reverse Cent, which the United States Mint struck from 1909 to 1958. This coin series was created to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln and was historically significant because it was the first regular-issue U.S. coin to feature a real person instead of symbolic imagery. The obverse portrait of Lincoln was designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner, whose initials VDB appear on many issues. By the time the 1953D coin was struck, the Wheat Penny series had already become a familiar part of American life, used daily in stores, banks, and households in the post-World War II economy. The 1953D wheat penny was minted at the Denver Mint, which can be identified by the small D mint mark placed just below the date. The early 1950s were a time of large-scale coin production in the United States, driven by economic expansion following the war, the baby boom, and growing consumer activity. As a result, the Denver Mint produced a very high number of pennies in 1953, tens of millions, making the 1953D a common date for collectors. Despite being relatively common, it represents the distinctive charm of the wheat ear reverse, a design created by Brenner to symbolize national agricultural strength. The reverse shows two stylized wheat stalks framing the denomination 1 cent, and the country name along with the motto EPLURIBUSUNUM. From a historical perspective, the 1953D cent reflects America's transition into the Cold War era. Coins like this circulated heavily during a period marked by rapid modernization, rising industry, and widespread use of the penny as everyday currency. These coins were made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which had been the standard composition since 1909, with the exception of the 1943 steel cents. Because copper was inexpensive and the penny's purchasing power was still meaningful in the early 1950s, the wheat cent remained an essential part of commerce. A single cent could buy small candies, newspapers sometimes cost a few cents, and vending machines often accepted pennies, making them necessary for daily transactions. Although the 1953D wheat penny is not rare, it holds strong historical value because it comes from the final decade of the wheat reverse design. In 1959, to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, the U.S. Mint replaced the wheat ears with the Lincoln Memorial Reverse, ending nearly half a century of the original symbol. For collectors today, the 1953D coin is often found in circulated condition, showing decades of wear from the years it spent changing hands. High-grade uncirculated examples, however, are admired for their bright red copper color and sharp details, making them desirable additions to Lincoln cent collections. Many collectors appreciate the 1953D for what it represents, a living piece of mid-20th century American history. Today, the 1953D wheat penny continues to be a popular coin among those who study U.S. numismatics. It serves as a reminder of America's post-war growth, the importance of the Lincoln cent in American culture, and the long legacy of the wheat-ear design. Whether discovered in an old jar of pennies inherited from a relative or purchased as part of a collection, the 1953D stands as a symbol of everyday American life in the 1950s and a connection to one of the most iconic coin series the United States has ever produced. Next up, the 1952 wheat penny without a mint mark is a classic piece of U.S. coinage representing a period of post-war American stability and growth. When a Lincoln cent lacks a mint mark, it means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place mint letters on pennies until much later, with the exception of the wartime 1943 steel cents. In 1952, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins, continuing a long-running series known formally as the Lincoln Wheat Cent, which had been in circulation since 1909. These coins featured the portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, sculpted by Victor David Brenner, and the classic wheat ears reverse that symbolized agricultural prosperity. By 1952, the wheat design had already been in use for over 4 decades and was nearing the end of its tenure, eventually being replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. The year 1952 landed squarely in the middle of the post-World War II era, a time when the American economy was booming, families were growing, suburbs were expanding, and the nation was transitioning into modern life. Coin production reflected this economic activity. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck well over 100 million no-mint-mark wheat pennies that year. Although high in mintage, these coins were essential to everyday commerce. They were used for newspapers, candy bars, soda, bus fares, and small daily transactions that helped define mid-century American life. Even though their copper value is higher than their face value today, they circulated heavily for decades and were a familiar sight in pockets and cash registers until the wheat design fully disappeared from circulation in the 1970s and early 1980s. The composition of the 1952 penny holds its own place in history. Like other wheat cents of its era, it was struck from 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a traditional bronze alloy that gave the coin its warm reddish-brown color. Americans of the time would have noticed that brand-new 1952 pennies emerged from the mint with a bright, almost golden luster, while circulated examples quickly darkened into deeper browns as they absorbed oils from handling. This composition also reflects the fact that the U.S. had returned to copper coinage after the 1943 steel penny experiment of World War II, when copper had been temporarily redirected toward war production. By 1952, stable copper supplies allowed the mint to produce abundant, high-quality bronze cents for everyday use, continuing a tradition that lasted until the composition change in 1982. Collectors today view the 1952 no-mint-mark wheat penny as a common yet historically meaningful coin. Because so many were produced, circulated examples are generally inexpensive, but higher-grade uncirculated pieces are far more desirable. Mint-state examples with strong luster, clean surfaces, and sharp strike detail, particularly those graded and above, carry significantly higher values. These coins are often sought after as affordable, accessible representatives of the Wheat Penny series. They also appeal to collectors who appreciate the nostalgia of old Lincoln cents and the craftsmanship of early 20th century U.S. coinage. Even though the 1952 wheat cent is not rare, it remains a piece of classic Americana, and a reminder of the era of soda fountains, post-war optimism, and the enduring legacy of Abraham Lincoln in American numismatics.